Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Landtech Link podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Must, and today I am joined by Jeannine Kunz, Director of Tooling U-SME, to discuss the skills gap that manufacturers are currently experiencing. We'll start off by discussing how they are pairing up with local trade schools, community colleges, and manufacturing facilities to discuss with the younger generations that and prove to them that a job in manufacturing is no longer what your grandparents or great-grandparents may have experienced. It's a lot more automated, a lot more software-driven and solutions-driven. So it's no longer the dark, dingy, tedious tasks day in and day out, but more so of a problem-solving standpoint. So not only are we going to discuss how they are trying to combat that with the younger generations, we're also going to talk with her about what the SME is doing to help build out training programs for manufacturing facilities' current employment to make sure that they stay up to date on the newest technologies, newest softwares, newest standards, and everything of that nature, so they can just make a more well-rounded workforce and build out their employees' resumes for them pretty much. So before we get into that, I'm going to go into a short break and then we'll dive into Jeannine's interview. Stay tuned and we'll be back with addressing the skills gap. Hello and welcome to the Landtech Link podcast, linking manufacturing professionals with industry experts. I'm your host, Kevin Must, with Landtech Systems, and I'm joined today by Jeannine Kunz, Vice President of Tooling U-SME, the training and development area of SME. I want to welcome you to the podcast and thank you for your time today, Jeannine.
Thank you.
So before we jump into everything with addressing the skills gap, I'd like for our listeners to have a little bit of a background of yourself and the SME as a whole. So we'll just kind of start off, very base level. What is your educational and or professional background?
Background in both education and professional has been, and basically I got my BBA, my Bachelor's in Business Administration, and spent most of my career kind of in the idea of understanding markets and how to serve them, what do they need, and finding solutions for those markets. And in particular, the last 18 years have been really focused on learning and development inside of manufacturing.
Okay, so what brought you into the manufacturing realm? Was it just open opportunity or running the family?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It was kind of unique, and I will admit I didn't realize a lot about manufacturing. It was an opportunity. There was the organization SME was looking for somebody who could again investigate markets and look at how to better serve the manufacturing industry as part of its nonprofit purpose. And that fit more my, I'll call it skill set, but in terms of the market, it was a little bit new to me. And admittedly, obviously I've stayed here for 18 years. It's something that I really fell in love with. It's such an important industry in terms of our economic viability, our, standard of living. And I've just learned so much, and it's a completely fascinating industry that I don't ever see myself leaving.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. Discussing, prior to this and my background, I never would have thought that I'd find myself in manufacturing. But, the more that I dive into it and the more that I research, it's just so fascinating seeing how things are made and kind of how it boosts our economy and, brings life back to the U.S. market.
Absolutely.
So, you said that your main focus then with them is obviously educational and making sure that businesses are set up the best possible way to move forward. As far as SME's main goals go, I know you said that, obviously you guys are a nonprofit. Overall, what would you say are the main goals of SME or your guys' mission statement?
Sure. Yeah, SME's been around for about 85 years and really with the sole purpose of kind of broadly speaking to advance manufacturing. And that's a very broad statement, of course. But the way we look at as an organization, how do we help advance manufacturing, and focus on two really kind of key areas. One being as you kind of mentioned earlier, Kevin, the industry is so rich with technology and advancement and a lot of, movement in terms of change. And so SME, one of its thrusts to help advance the industry is to really focus on those technologies, what's happening, what's new, how do manufacturers become aware of them, how do they learn how to adapt them, incorporate them, look at how it benefits their process, new product development, innovation, et cetera. So that's a big part of what SME does. It does that through things like our events where we bring people together to showcase software, equipment, new technologies, new materials, et cetera. We do a lot of publishing on the technical topics through our magazines, podcasts like this, et cetera. And then the other aspect I mentioned, there's two, one being kind of the advancements of the technology. And the other one that I'm privileged to oversee is really the advancement of people. Mm-hmm. And we as an organization believe to advance the industry, those two things need to kind of be addressed simultaneously, that you're looking at new technology, investing in new technologies, new equipment, new software, new materials, and at the same time, you're equally investing in your people to leverage all those things. And when you do that, we believe the companies grow, the communities grow, and ultimately the industry of manufacturing advances.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point that you make there with investing in new technologies and as well as personnel. Unfortunately, if you get this new technology, but you don't have someone or you don't invest to have someone learn how to use it, then it's kind of just going to sit there and, it may not be utilized to its best capacities. So that's a very awesome initiative that SME and yourself are putting on to make sure that people are aware and knowledgeable in these new advancements coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and on that point, because one of the things we're seeing that unfortunately is, I think, stagnating or at least slowing down our pace of growth as an industry is that technology is outpacing the people. And even in the cases where sometimes we're investing and doing good things inside of companies, that the technology that's out there, we're just not able to leverage, and thus ultimately not able to really kind of take advantage, if you will, of those new forms of doing things or, new equipment, as you said. So it's a pretty critical issue to get in front of that we are keeping pretty busy in trying to help address. Yeah,
I'm sure you're very busy trying to keep up with all the new technologies coming out. It's very tough. So then just before we get into everything here, what are some of your hobbies? What do you do for fun outside of the manufacturing realm?
What do I do outside of fun? Well, the good news for me is I do have a lot of fun in my job. I really honestly do. And I don't know, probably not everyone can say that, but I'm very fortunate to say that. But outside of that, yes, I have a family which keeps me busy, two younger girls, 12 and 8, and both, 8-year-old in basketball, and my 12-year-old is pretty avid golfer. And so both of those things are kind of became my new hobbies. I used to play tennis myself, but that kind of went by the wayside for the kids' sports for now until they get a little older.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got your hands full there between work and a 12 and an 8-year-old. But that's great to hear that they're active in sports, and maybe through seeing their mother working in manufacturing, they may get an idea to go through some STEM programs or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My daughter, she was reciting and writing things at school about manufacturing when she was 8, my 12-year-old, and I realized I probably say more than I realized about the great industry of manufacturing at home when I saw her write these things, and her teachers would ask me, "What do you do? Because your daughter says all these things about manufacturing." So it's kind of fun.
Well, yeah, that's great. That's great that at a young age she's already kind of expressing some interest into it. So, with that said, that brings us into our main topic, and a very hot topic for manufacturers today is addressing the skills gap. As you've mentioned, technology is unfortunately outpacing, human reserves and kind of advancements in our own knowledge base. So, with that said, would you say that we're seeing more emphasis in early education when it comes to manufacturing or technical educations?
Yeah, we definitely are. And so we talked a little bit earlier, Kevin, about how SME and certainly the education area helps businesses with their people and, the acquisition of technology, the acquisition of people, the investments in those two things. And that's certainly a big part of what we do. What I didn't mention is part of that whole ecosystem is the education side. So we are also fortunate enough to work with everything from really not much below the high schools, to be honest. Really, it's starting mostly in the high schools, community colleges and universities. And, so we kind of, the benefit we get is that we're seeing that across the country here in the United States. So we get to kind of watch the trends, myself even personally, certainly for the last 18 years. And I can tell you that there is definitely a strong movement here in the last several years in terms of investments and re-looking at our education system and what's happening, in particular, the high schools. As we know, we lost a lot of what used to be called the VOTEC inside of high schools, and there's still issues where we need to rebuild that very important component of our education system. However, what I can share with you is the trend of that improving is certainly there. And in particular, what you're seeing, some really great, I'll call it initiatives inside of what's called Career and Tech Ed, if you're familiar with CTE. And actually, February is CTE month so we're ending the month here, and February 28th is kind of celebrating CTE. And that important part of the education system, because not all kids are academically looking to move on to 4-year degrees and programs. Some want to work with their hands. Some are very much meant for a field of study in these career and tech ed programs. And one I like to talk about is some of the schools that we see advancing to like a simulated workplace. So these kids that are in the CTE, they're in the CTE program. They're doing things, what you'd almost call in manufacturing a job shop. They're taking on actually a small manufacturing project from maybe a local employer, or sometimes the city might say, I want to build some benches, or whatever it might be, that then the school is actually going through, and the students are actually going through the process of quoting that, trying to figure out what it's going to cost to build, what their markup is. They're actually looking at from the business side, the marketing, the sales, the service, and then ultimately, going in and making it, making whatever that product is, and, doing all the trials and tribulations of actually simulated work environment as if they were in a company with a project, for a client. So some really awesome things that are happening, still not enough. And CTE programs are very challenged with a lot of the state funding, cuts or the limited money they get. But again, a lot of these really progressive, innovative programs are out partnering with businesses. The business is obviously recognizing the importance of these programs being successful and strong, making those appropriate investments to help the schools find other funding, outside of maybe the traditional funds from a state to build out those programs.
Yeah, and that's very interesting that you mentioned that. There's a local school here by us that they've actually partnered with some local manufacturers as well as a local community college to have, maybe their shop manager or production manager come in, speak to the class, kind of help as an instructor, as well as the instructor from the community college, to make it, more interesting to the kids. And I feel you were, mentioning how there's a decline in the VOTEC arena, maybe a decade ago or so. And, I feel, and a question for you as well, I feel that there was an emphasis on the 4-year college, and that manufacturing was a dirty, dingy job. So people thought, the perceptions were shaped as, oh, you don't want to go into that. But nowadays, with OSHA regulations and everything else, and the advancement in technologies, these shops are very clean. I was very impressed when I did some plant tours for my first time. How clean they were, how well lit, how everything was set up. So would you say, that decline was seen because there was more of that emphasis on the 4-year college, and parents maybe trying to steer their kids away from manufacturing?
Yeah, I think your insights are really spot on. I think that's certainly one of the key drivers, and it hurt us as a country, right? Because we don't have the pipeline of individuals that are or have gone in the direction of some of these, CTE programs that we're talking about, or inside of a community college, some of the advanced manufacturing programs. However, during that same time, as you said, the industry has changed tremendously. And if you think of all the things we just talked about that we're not even harnessing in the advancements of the technology, a lot of those advancements are around automation and programming and digital environments, a lot of data analytics now. And you're thinking of the digital factory. And as you said, just even the OSHA and the safety and the clean environments. But it really has just changed the jobs too, a lot less manual jobs. So the contributing factor, as you said, were kind of some of the parents steering their kids away from the 4-year, to the 4-year degrees versus these other paths. And that was a component. And then there was that fear, right, of the loss of jobs that they saw in some of those decades, where manufacturing did go overseas. And some of those jobs aren't going to come back, but those were the really manual, repetitive jobs that did kind of create that perception. Those jobs are gone. But those jobs aren't the jobs we're talking about that need filling. The jobs that need filling are much more high tech, much more complex, much more rewarding, challenging jobs that many young people would love to take all their kind of tech savvy attributes that they have and apply them in a very rewarding way to make things that change lives, here in not just in our country, but in our world.
Well, yeah, and that's great that you mentioned that. I know in one of the YouTube videos that I had seen you speak in was they were talking about, or you were talking about a manufacturer in a medical device industry that was making hip replacements, and it's not just making that part or that hip replacement. It's knowing that that's going to help somebody be able to walk again or be more active in their lifestyle. And that right there, to me, is just naturally rewarding, knowing, okay, what I'm doing is helping others as well. It's not just producing one thing and being done at the end of the day.
Right. And in manufacturing, that was the part you asked earlier about when I entered the industry, the eye-opening realization of the impact that people in this industry have on our lives. As you said, I think unfortunately as a society, we don't really connect and think about those things. How did our car get here?
Yeah.
I'm in the operating room. How does this equipment and the technology and the tools that these doctors and nurses or surgeons are using, how did they come about? And we just don't really, and I realized I didn't. And when you start to look at it differently, you realize the criticality of these jobs again, and the rewarding aspect, as you said, of what you're actually doing in the end of the day. And not to switch gears, but we know from all the research, when you look at millennials in terms of, and many generations, I don't want to just target millennials, but millennials in particular, wanting to really rise above just what their job is and really understand the purpose of their organization and what they're doing to make a difference. And what a better industry to find as a home than manufacturing to fulfill that need of a millennial.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. So then would you say, with this kind of shift in education and in manufacturers and schools seeing this need for it, would you say that there's more apprenticeships and co-op opportunities that are becoming more relevant again?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot around that. Now, quite honestly, some of it helped the sparking of the Department of Labor and certainly their issuance of some grant funding that went out. It was, I don't recall exactly, it was maybe like a year and a half ago, where they put about $90 million out into the market to help spur and support the apprenticeships, because the idea was, and I agree with it, the idea was this is an important way of investing in this important challenge that we have, this critical challenge that we have as a nation. And apprenticeships was at the time a very revered and important role in terms of workforce development. We just kind of got away from it, but it's a tried and true, very strong way of using kind of, allows that employee to earn while they, earn money while they learn. and also get that true hands-on skills development. So yes, that push from the Department of Labor, but also I'll call it the embracing of it from the industry itself and the academic market and supporting it. Organizations like SME, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the MEP, which is through NIST, all these different organizations and companies that kind of got behind it and said, yeah, the 21st century apprenticeship program, which is more competency-based, is something that makes sense as one of the many tools to kind of build out my workforce for not only today's challenge, but tomorrow. So we have seen, again, we get to kind of see those trends because we notice the difference when things peak. And to answer your question, it most certainly has been peaking. Now, in most companies, you still might only have handfuls of apprenticeships or apprentices in terms of what's happening, but ultimately it's a very critical part of, again, is companies look at their overall structured, sustainable workforce development training plan to build their workforce. More and more companies are certainly knocking on our door and other, colleges' doors on how to go about doing this in a new way, right? The new 21st century way, which is, and what that means, Kevin, is a lot of it, the old programs of yesteryears and apprenticeships were very time-based. It was, a certain number of RTI hours and things that had to be documented, and really moving towards documenting. If Kevin already has a competency and you can be assessed to that competency and prove out a skill or knowledge, then we shouldn't have you go through that just because it's seat time.
Yeah.
We should give you credit for that and focus on where you need to really earn and learn your skills and knowledge. And that way, then you meet your requirements much faster. Everybody benefits. You do, the company does, the economy does, et cetera. So that's a little bit of what we're seeing, and definitely see a rise on that. And we're, pretty heavily engaged ourselves as an organization in creating those and getting those new apprenticeships registered with the Department of Labor. So things like an additive manufacturing with 3D printing, some of these things that didn't exist before, that are new job, new roles, new competencies out in the marketplace. We've been really working pretty hard with Department of Labor and other organizations to get those things documented. What does that mean then for this particular profession, and get that registered with the Department of Labor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know for me, I'm more of a hands-on type learner, and especially with manufacturing, you can read all this out of the books, but when it comes to solutions orientation, you need to have that hands-on experience of, okay, something went awry. How do I get to the solution fastest and most efficiently? And for me, and I think a lot of people as well, apprenticeships and co-ops is really the only way that you can really know that you have honed in your skill and your competencies when it comes to things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, it's a great way, right, for if you're an individual going through that program, it's a really good way, too, to really kind of test your own career path and interest. And, everyone kind of wins when you look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, like, testing out that you were speaking of and being more competency-based, I know for me and I would say a majority of individuals, if you're already maybe ahead and you already know the basics of something that's being taught in a class, you kind of just shut down. I already know this, so why am I in this class right now? As opposed to testing out of it and, hey, you can prove you're already knowledgeable in it. Let me, use my time to benefit myself, my job, and my ultimate career path by, learning something new. So that's neat. That's a very nice initiative that you guys have. And then, so you were speaking about, grant funding from the Department of Labor to support apprenticeships. Is that something that obviously it would help a manufacturer? So would they go to the Department of Labor and say, hey, we're looking to start an apprenticeship program or a co-op program, and receive then a grant or funding from the Department of Labor to build that program out and maybe pay their apprentices?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Basically, I'm understanding you're almost saying, okay, then if someone hears this, what do they do? And the way the Department of Labor issued their grant funding is they, various communities, organizations came together and kind of did, their proposal into the Department of Labor and said, here's how I will use your grant funding to build these programs in my community with these partners, with these employers. So what happens is that money gets distributed throughout the United States to various organizations. Who I was just in a meeting yesterday, and here in Southeast Detroit area in Michigan, and they basically, the group that had gotten some of these funds said, hey, we still have a little bit of money left. This is like basically a community-based type organization that we partner with. So if there's employers who are still looking for, reimbursement and help with an apprenticeship program, we, this organization, have money to help support them. So the way, again, Kevin, it worked is the money from the Department of Labor went to these various organizations out throughout the United States, and then employers work with those organizations. So it's not even, so it kind of is a route through, it's the Department of Labor is using these various groups who, rightfully, that was a good strategy because they're the ones that are kind of feet on the street in these markets, can, partner with the right organizations and do kind of the lifting and the implementation. The Department of Labor is certainly spurring it through the support through the funding, as well as having the registered programs for apprenticeships. So I would say, to kind of simplify it, if anyone who is looking for that, even if they called our organization, through SME, we could find out where they're located, find out where their grant funding is, maybe near their, organization. And we do that all the time. So that's not an unusual thing. We work with people all the time on helping get them connected. We do it for our customers. We do it for people who, like you said, are just kind of randomly saying, hey, I want to do this and I don't know how.
Yeah. And that's great. It builds that communal trust between everybody, because it's not just going to the employer, but also into the community as well, to make sure that they're pairing and working with other people in the community. So that's really neat. So as far as, any manufacturers that you see or programs that manufacturers offer to currently employed workers to advance their skills, is there any manufacturer or program that you see as a leader in the field of, investing in their personnel and their education?
Yeah, it's a tremendous question, and I will say I won't pick the top one just because I have so many. We have so many great employers that we work with that the key for us is really. Back to, when you asked about kind of our nonprofit, purpose, one of our big purposes is really trying to make sure, and this is why we want to do things like even this podcast and get engaged and speak out in the community, is there's nothing worse for us than seeing the employer that calls us and says, I just lost, $1 million order because I don't have the people to, or they don't have the capabilities and I can't retool my environment because they need this kind of, product, and I can't do this. When it comes back to I can't do this, and the answer is I can't do it because of people, we just kind of cringe, right? And so I say that in the sense that, one of the big things we try to do is just help companies realize that it's important to get in front of this. It's like preventative maintenance of your health, right? You just got to stay on top of this, because you don't want to be getting that phone call. You don't want to be kind of behind the 8 ball. So the organizations we work with, the good news is they've crossed that bridge, right? They've crossed that bridge and they've said, I do want to invest in my people. I do see this as a critical part of my strategy for my organization, not just checking the box that they're training, but they're connecting the investment to people to their top KPIs of the organization, to their profitability, to their brand, to their customer service, their, productivity, everything, their innovation. When a company crosses that bridge, that's typically when we're working with them. And so the good news is we get to see, again, lots of different things, kind of sometimes the good, the bad, and the ugly. But there's lots of these great examples. And, so I'll just name a couple really, good ones that I'll take one that it's Pella, so Pella Windows and Pella, Iowa. And we met them probably now almost 2 years ago. And, they kind of came and asked us about doing a workforce performance assessment. They said, hey, can you come in and can you look at our organization and can you see where we are? And we a little bit scratched our heads, because a lot of times when we come in, we're looking at an organization that typically is not maybe in the best of shape, but has crossed that bridge and said, I want to get in good shape, right? They've gone to the gym and they're seeing the personal trainer and they're ready to go. And so we kind of look at Pella a little bit with this question. How we're like, wow, you're kind of getting a lot of green lights on a lot of these categories that we typically look for, for indication of health, in terms of their workforce. And so I'm citing them because here's a company that had actually a really strong workforce in place. They had very high retention of their employees. They had very tenured people. They had some really good programs in place. But when we dug in deeper, I commended them because they said, yeah, but you know what? We do have these good programs and we've been doing a good job. We have a good culture of learning. We've invested in our people. They stay with us because they know the strong bond between people and leadership and importance to our overall organization. But Pella actually was taking it further by really looking ahead in that preventative maintenance category and said, yeah, but you know what? A lot of those people who've been with us for 30 years are going to leave. And I haven't, as an organization, needed to maybe connect with the local schools as much and the community-based organizations to build those relationships, to build pipelines or build strong onboarding programs because I've kept my people, right? So almost interestingly, here you have a company that was doing the right things, but those right things actually created different issues, right? They created, I don't really have a strong onboarding program because I haven't onboarded a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I haven't connected with the community. So we went and we worked with them and we really kind of basically then started looking at, okay, so you really want to make sure you can adapt the new technologies that are in front of you and you really want to deal with the fact that you're retiring workforce. So just a great example of a company that really strategically looked out and said, yeah, all these great employees that I've had that are happy, we've done the right things for it, they're going to leave. And I need to then, what does that then do, Kevin? Then they really had to look at really documenting those competencies of those jobs and really building a very strong program to kind of take that tribal knowledge and build it into a strong onboarding program and on-the-job training program to transition people, from that new employment into those kinds of roles that will be soon vacant from retirees. So I think that's, one example. You certainly I could talk about more, but I, don't want to go on and on because you can see I can.
It's a very important topic, and manufacturers are wanting to hear this definitely. And that's, that's interesting that you had mentioned with them reaching out to local schools and pairing up with them to kind of realize, hey, we need to get out in the community and get our name out there because right now, as you know, we're seeing, and the reason for this skills gap is a lot of baby boomers are becoming retiree age, right? So they can retire here soon, and the new technologies are at a point where it's like, well, I don't really want to learn this new technology because I'm going to retire in 2 years. But then on the flip side, you've got, the millennial generation that's coming out of high school or coming out of college and not necessarily thinking about manufacturing. And that's where the stock is that we need to focus on. So by pairing with those local schools, if they are high schools or even colleges, that definitely puts the word out there for people to think, oh, maybe manufacturing is, maybe that's the best route for me to take actually.
Right.
And then are there any particular schools, whether they be technical, high schools or even colleges that you see that are ahead of the curve in combating this skills gap or addressing it?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So many good examples there. So we have, I think, some great examples at each level, in the high school, the community college, and universities. We've talked a lot about kind of the skilled trades, right? The production jobs, a lot of the welders and machinists, those that go maybe into a career and tech program, maybe onto the community college and then into a career apprenticeship. But there are not as drastic of gaps in the engineering side, but certainly there are in those. A great, I think, example of Georgia Tech University is, I don't remember their exact percentage of how many engineers that they produce in terms of manufacturing that go into manufacturing, but I know it's a decent percent. And in their case, they're keeping up with, all those new technologies and making sure that they really are engaging students in the kinds of things that manufacturers need today. They do a ton of outreach to local employers and partner, again, more hands-on with the kinds of almost things that we would do, right? Just getting in, working with a company, trying to solve their problems. On the community college side, you could look at, we were talking about, apprenticeships earlier, and you've got, schools like Lake Michigan, here in Michigan, that does a lot of outreach and partnerships with the same thing. Kind of really, I would say that the key that we see is those schools that really step outside of their internal world in academia and truly go into the market, partner with employers, and get really, hands-on on what is it that you need inside of your, company, inside of this region and this market. Because, regions differ. Aerospace might be strong, out in the Northwest, or automotive certainly here in the Michigan and Midwest area. And I would say in high schools, if I could just, talk a little bit about our, we have an education foundation. So we talked a lot about SME. SME also has an education foundation. And for the last probably 4 or 5 years, our education foundation, so SME has been around for 85. Our foundation's probably about 35 of those years. And again, it was a little bit what you said earlier. It's like, to advance the industry, we realized we could do all those things I talked about earlier, but we better make sure there's people coming behind the story. And so at least we were astute enough at the time, 35 some years ago, to then set up our education foundation. And really a lot of that was originally kind of spurring, where we were giving grants to schools. We were, and we still do, give hundreds of thousands of dollars to scholarships to encourage kids to go into the field of study. And that's, kind of, been there since our roots. But the last 5 years, to get at your education question, we created a program in our foundation called PRIME, and it stands for Partnership Response and Manufacturing Education. And really the heart of the program is this intersection that we've been talking about between employers, communities, and educators. And in this case, it's where the employers are coming to our foundation, partnering with our foundation and saying, I am a manufacturer and I mostly am busy making things. I necessarily am not somebody who can go work, and they sometimes will have employees certainly focus on the schools, but they're coming to our foundation saying, it is important to me that the supply chain of the education system, the academic system, is producing students that are qualified for the jobs that I have open today, so the employer is saying I have this need. So what they do is that they partner with our education foundation, and they actually then are contributing money through the foundation that then gets funneled to the school in their local market. So we could use like an example of Honda or Alcoa, which is now called Arconic, that where they're saying, here's a school that I really count on this school for hiring. I count on them to be strong, and they basically partner them with our foundation to kind of go do the work, do the implementation with the school and the employers, so that they are going in, literally in, working hand in hand with the administrators, the instructors, the career counselors. And think of it, Kevin, as a very holistic view of what's taking place inside the school and matching that up with what's needed in the market. And then basically using those good funds that the employer provided to target where the investment needs. So it might be in some school, they might need new welding equipment because welding is important in their region. It might be curriculum, and they need, kind of the state-of-the-art curriculum in manufacturing, and, that's industry-driven, like ours as an example, or others that, focus on certain technologies. They look at spending money with the career counselors, even middle school camps. So again, it's this very kind of concierge, hands-on building of the program, hand in hand, arm in arm with the educator, and ultimately with the employer being kind of the ultimate consumer of those great kids that come in then out of the program. And so we have wonderful examples of that if any listeners are interested on our SME Education Foundation website.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Being that kind of liaison between the educator and the manufacturer, which is a huge initiative, I know, for SME in your educational program. So, with that, we'll shift into here and speak a little more on SME as a whole and the programs that you guys are offering. I know you've got an extensive library of coursework and books and lectures and everything out on your website and with the educational program. But what other types of educational programs does the SME offer when it comes to maybe more hands-on stuff for students and or manufacturers to offer?
Yeah, so great question. So a couple things, like you said, I would say we have all those traditional things that you'd picture, a provider of training offering, the books, the videos, the e-learning classes, the certification programs. And those, as you said, are all more knowledge-based, right? They're all driving, do you understand the principles of XYZ topic? Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we, in terms of helping with the hands-on, there are several things we do. We certainly help with having almost kind of outlines or projects that the instructors inside of schools or inside of companies, if there are trainers, to follow these projects to help. Like you said, it's fine that I took my online class on welding, but you shouldn't assume I'm a welder until you've executed on documenting my skills. So we almost help provide the how-to to the employer to document and verify skills. So it's almost like have employee do an arc weld, have them do this, or have this project inside the classroom to basically take the knowledge and now apply it in this project form. So kind of think of it as like the support materials that really kind of help drive skills validation, skills development, application of knowledge. So that would be one aspect. We also partner with some organizations. So again, if I use the welding space, we partner with organizations like Lincoln Electric that, again, inside, if the school has it, they would have then the simulators, maybe the welding simulators that they could do the certain, again, testing of their abilities. Lastly, inside of a company, we have been doing a lot more work in the on-the-job training aspect. So we produce curriculum, but we also do almost think of it as like learning and development consulting inside of companies where we're building out programs that, when I talked about Pella and you've got the retiring workforce and you've got the current workforce that you're onboarding, you truly need to kind of have that onboarding, have very strong components for on-the-job training, as you said, skills development. So we will a lot of times go in and literally build that onboarding program with a strong on-the-job training, so that really it's almost kind of a turnkey for those that are inside the organization to implement.
Yeah, that's neat. It's almost you guys come in and assess their needs, because I know I was just kind of briefly scrolling through all the different courses that are offered by the Tooling U-SME, and quite a few courses there. So, from the manufacturer standpoint, it can be like very overwhelming. Oh man, there's thousands of courses. Which ones do I actually need? So it's nice that you guys come in and assess their needs, and knowing your guys' curriculum to be able to say, these are the courses you're looking at that would really benefit your staff and your staff members.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Kevin, because I would say that you've hit it right on the head of where we saw kind of the bottleneck sometimes is the manufacturer that I talked about that crossed that bridge and says, I do want to do this, I want to make an investment. It can be very overwhelming because back to they're busy making things. They're worried about getting, products, safe environments, adopting the new technology, keeping their machines running, et cetera, that building, training programs is not always, sometimes, especially in smaller business, their core competency. If you're a small enough business that you don't have people who even do that. And so leaving them standing at the edge of the canyon with a very big, overwhelming set of tools, but not in an orchestrated way, doesn't really help them. So we've really realized, as again, an organization that's dedicated to advancing the industry, we can't just step back and leave them staying at the edge of the canyon.
Yeah.
We need to help them build the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you were speaking with like even the welding competencies with the Lincoln Electric Simulator. I actually had an opportunity to use one. I think it was back in October.
You did?
Yeah, I went up to their plant up in Cleveland, and it was a little difficult to get used to the VR headset at first, but it's very very interesting how they use not only visuals and audible effects, but then you can take those off once you see, okay, I'm getting a good angle with my hands, or a good distance from the part. And on that note, they're not wasting, or not, I hate to say wasting material, but they're not using materials that they're paying more for and then end up scrapping. It's just all on a little piece of plastic, pretty much. I thought that was very neat seeing that. And one of the guys in the class, he had been a welder for about 25 years, and he just got up there, no guides or anything, and had like a 98%. so it just goes to show, of 25 years in the industry and in experience, he can pretty much do it with his eyes closed.
That's great.
So then these programs that you guys offer, you said that they're online and you pair with manufacturers as well. Do you guys also pair with, like universities or technical schools to help kind of to mediate between school learning or classroom learning and the manufacturer on the shop floor learning?
Yeah, definitely. We really try to approach it that, there's a lot of times actually that, staying at the edge of the canyon, we're really trying to help the manufacturer look at what are they already doing inside of their organization, which is, typically some, really good elements to utilize in kind of our recipe. And then certainly sometimes they're not even aware of things that are going on in their local community college, or they're already partnering. And so what we try to do is build out the plan, fill it in with as much as we can with what's already going on, what's available in their market, and then help supplement what we can do. Or sometimes it just doesn't exist, and then we help build it. We just use our kind of expertise in the curriculum development and help build it. But it's very, very common for certainly the local educators to be part of it, and they can certainly do a lot of the skills validation and development, because a lot of these schools have very good equipment, to utilize for organizations for training.
Yeah. And then also, would you say, and this is a lot of research that I've seen, and we spoke about this earlier, about the, parents' perceptions of manufacturing jobs and kind of that steering away from them almost. Would you say that, we're seeing a shift in this perception, and is SME kind of helping to, I don't want to say fully focusing on this, but are they helping to try and change that perception or shape that perception that it's not this dirty, dingy job anymore?
Yeah, so two-part answer to that. The first one being, yes, I think it's improved. Funny, quick little story is I remember being at an event and speaking on a topic regarding workforce, and we had a panel, and all of us on the panel were, well into our career in terms of age, and out in the audience was a lot of people who were more tenured in their careers, but there was actually some young people that had just been, recently out of college, and this young man stands up and he says, we were talking a little bit about the perception and, the issues, and this young man stands up, and to me, it just stuck with me, because he said, I don't even know if I would know what you guys were talking about, but you guys keep talking. Like, we're almost at the point being, we're the ones perpetuating it. Yeah. He said, I've never heard this dark, dangerous thing. And I kind of laughed. I was like, yeah, well, so there is some of that. Then there's some truth to what that young man said, but then there's truth to the fact that we do certainly carry down into generations the beliefs of, our generation, our parents, et cetera, that have, continued to cascade, but that's diminishing over time. So I think some of these new things, such as 3D printing, has opened up how manufacturing, because it even has like an art component to it that you'd certainly safely argue. And that is opened up, the image again of what manufacturing means to people, and also opening up to new audiences. and, like females. And so that's a component. Then the second part, as you said, is, how does SME see this? Truthfully, this is an area we need to probably tackle stronger. We have been focused so much on the things I talked to you about, and those things inherently do help change the perception. So we certainly, feel good about those things. But at a high level within our organization, we have actually just recently said this is something we need to do more efforts around. We recently launched what's called Humans in Manufacturing, and I don't know if you're familiar, like Humans in New York.
Oh yeah.
But it's, yeah. So we did Humans in Manufacturing. You can see it at sme.org/humans, but it's really taking these stories of individuals to bring to life how it's different than maybe people's perceptions. So that's certainly one thing, and that makes an impact, but we're not going to rest on just that. We really want to go after this, and it won't just be SME. It's really a coalition of organizations like SME that serve industry, this manufacturing industry, that need to come together. But SME certainly wants to take a strong movement forward on that.
Yeah, and kind of speaking to that 3D printing, I just saw something. We have a regional manufacturing association, the DRMA, and they paired with a local school where they brought in some 3D printers. And it was just so neat to see, because they were probably 5th, 6th grade students that were interacting with these 3D printers, and just how excited that they were. It was amazing. You could just tell that there's more interest in, seeing, I can create literally something out of nothing and watch it just build up right there in front of my eyes. That's amazing.
Right. And it really touches on all the things you said, kind of throughout our conversation about. And that's completely different than, even 20 years ago, certainly 4 years ago in manufacturing, those kinds of things that really changes what people's perceptions of the jobs in manufacturing, were to what they actually are today, and the kinds of jobs that really are going to be a lot of those jobs that manufacturers have concerns about filling too. Yeah,
it's definitely an interesting time that we're living in with these technology advancements, and seeing where it's going to take us from there. Is there anything, that's all the questions that I've got for you, Jeannine. Is there anything else that you'd like to add here at the end, or maybe extrapolate on that we were talking about earlier?
And maybe just a closing comment is just really, again, kind of at the core of really what we try to ensure is that manufacturers are thinking outward, and that's very, outward in terms of years and in front of them, and strategically on both the technology and the people side. But we don't pretend to be naive enough to know that that's an easy thing to say when there's just, day-to-day challenges, right, that need to be addressed. But just the more we can kind of reinforce the importance of finding time at some point in the agenda and the business plans and the strategic plans of organizations to get in front of this, even if it's one small step at a time, will ensure, kind of the long-term health and competitiveness of the industry, and certainly the organizations and communities that make it up.
Yeah, and being able to, pair with the SME and have them, have you guys help them out. It is, like we were saying earlier, overwhelming, but that's what you guys are there for, to help figure out.
That's why we're here.
What exactly do we need from our manufacturing standpoint? Because our needs are different than our neighbors that are using different tools or producing different products overall. So, it's very nice to have the SME there and as a resource to help people when it comes to education and anything further than that as well. The Lantec Link podcast helps link manufacturing professionals with industry experts, providing news and insights regarding technology, education, and the economy of manufacturing in the U.S. This podcast will answer questions manufacturing professionals may have about Industry 4.0. If you would like to suggest a topic or be a guest on our show, please email Kevin Must at k.must@lantecsms.com.